Hi, this is Hilary from On Humans. I hope that you've had a good start to 2025. And during the first couple of weeks, I'm going to be releasing a few bonus episodes from my conversations from the past year. These are unheard cuts that didn't quite fit into the original episode, but I thought it was very much worth sharing with you anyway. So this one is from my conversation with anthropologist Katie Starkweather. Now, as a little background, if you're someone interested in human sexuality and the evolution of romantic love, any of those topics, you're bound to have noticed that things like homosexuality, well, it just confuses people working around evolution. Everyone agrees that it exists, and then there's the question of how do we explain it. Then there are things that are very, very easy to explain. Men deciding to mate with multiple women. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a cheap way of spreading the seed, so to speak. Monogamy is not quite as easy to explain, but there's a lot of theories about why long-term commitments to a partner from both sides, from the female and the male side, could have evolved. Okay, so those things are on the table. But then there's one almost like a dark shadow that no one really ventures in, which is what about one woman deciding to have several partners, even having several husbands? Now, this is an idea that is sometimes literally by heavyweight people like Symons in his book Evolution of Human Sexuality said that this idea is evolutionarily, quote, dubious. Katie Starkweather disagrees. She has wonderful examples that she shares in this conversation from around the world of one woman having many husbands or one woman having many kind of accepted lovers. Sometimes men even being happy to hear that their wives have many boyfriends. So I'm going to let her tell more about that. I'm going to let her speak also about her work, pushing a little bit against one very, very persistent idea, which is that jealousy is fundamentally different for men and women, that men tend to be sexually jealous because they want to make sure that if there's a kid, it's going to be their kid. Whereas women tend to be more emotionally jealous because they want to make sure that the man is committed to them. It's a very, very persistent idea in evolutionary psychology. And it's an idea that she again brings, if nothing else, then at least much more nuance into. So I hope that you enjoyed this short conversation. If you do, as always, subscribe to the show if you haven't done so yet. Give it a 5-star review if you haven't done so yet. And as a final thing, I want to say thank you to all my Patreon supporters for supporting me through 2024. I hope that you decide to keep doing it in 2025. And if you're someone who's considering doing that, then head to patreon.com/onhumans to chip in a small amount monthly, if that's something that suits you. Anyway, I bring to you one more time, for a very short period of time, Katie Starkweather. Enjoy.
Polyandry is technically defined as the simultaneous marriage or mating of one woman to more than one man simultaneously. It is a form of mating that is relatively rare, it seems, in the cross-cultural literature, but is not as rare as was showing up in textbooks.
Yeah, it's not dubious as an idea.
Yeah, it's not dubious as an idea, not at all. Like the preference for polyandrous marriage at a societal level is super rare.
Okay.
But the allowance of polyandrous marriage or mating is not that rare and just seems to be sort of a flexible response to lots of different conditions.
So one of them would be the Inuit condition where losing
a
husband would be so catastrophic to the child that it's a good idea to have a kind of backup.
That's right.
And the number one husband agrees that let's have a backup.
Yes. And that's exactly the same argument in sort of some of the South American cases where men are providing large portions of the diet, but also where warfare is really common, where men are likely to die due to warfare or dangerous hunting activities. And where it's really, again, really catastrophic to the kids to have their father die. And so in those cases, it sometimes turns up as polyandrous marriage, and it sometimes turns up as what's called partible paternity.
Yes.
Which is this cultural belief that more than one man is the biological father of a baby. And so that typically any man who a woman has sex with before or during a pregnancy is a contributor to the biological makeup of that baby. And then therefore also has some social responsibilities to the babies.
There's a really funny passage in Hrdy's new book where she says that she cannot help but think of an old grandmother in the Amazonian hammock just chuckling at herself of having spread this wonderful rumor that will then make all of these men be more invested in the but this does raise the question of how often is it an empowering experience versus the opposite? I mean, how often is it the woman's choice? How often is it almost the opposite? Where how often is it forced upon the woman? Do we have any data on that?
No, I mean, I think it's just really variable, like how much control women have over the situation and everything. What I will say though, I have worked briefly with my colleague Brooke Scelza and Sean Prall. And Brooke and Sean have both done a lot of work with Himba communities in rural Namibia, where multiple mating, both formal and informal mating by men and women, is normal and preferred. And so that's a really interesting case study where women usually have a formal marital partner, and then they have informal partnerships as well with boyfriends. And while I don't mean to paint it as, this like rosy, again, there's a lot of gender inequality in various ways in those communities. But women, largely have a lot of choice around who their boyfriends are, and things like that. And it's also men in the community sort of not only recognize and kind of like quote unquote allow this behavior to happen, but some men have been quoted as saying that they actually prefer their wives to have boyfriends because what that indicates is that they're a desirable partner.
Yeah,
Right?
it's classic. Of course, the men would say that.
Yeah, so they have these like really intricate like
That's really
ways
funny.
of planning so that the men don't have to encounter the boyfriend. So they don't like officially want to know who the boyfriends are, even though everyone usually knows.
Okay.
But yeah, there are like cultural
Okay.
rules about, when you can come home and when you can't come home, because if you come home after dark, you're supposed to go find somewhere else to sleep because the woman might be with her boyfriend. And then the boyfriends have to leave before the sun comes up because they shouldn't encounter the husband.
That's fascinating. And how do they feel about the children? Do they believe in partible paternity? And if they don't, are they completely fine with taking care of the offspring that they think would have been from one of these anonymous boyfriends? Or
They do not believe in partible paternity. I don't think, to my knowledge, that's not, a belief that they even are aware of. But yes, in general, so Brooke has this great paper that came out a few years ago where they looked at genetic fatherhood of all of the kids or many of the kids and found that there's a really high rate of non-paternity, um, and that um, men and women were very aware of who was and wasn't whose biological kids. But the Himba also have this concept, which many communities have, of social fatherhood, and that they are responsible. So any children born to a man's wife, he has social fatherhood over, and he's responsible for the caretaking of those kids.
okay, so this is an example where the classic evolutionary based armchair logic that, well, a man would never want to take care of someone else's, so they will control the female sexuality to the extreme, as you see in a lot of historical harems. This just hasn't appeared as a problem for the Himba men.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah. Not yet, yeah.
No.
Don't tell them to be worried about. Okay, no, this is fascinating. This is fascinating. I mean, before we end, I do want to just quickly also ask. I mean, you weren't the first author, but I don't know how involved you were. But I also saw that you were co-author on a paper about the traditional evolutionary psychology theory that men tend to feel sexual jealousy and women tend to feel emotional jealousy more strongly. And you looked at this in non-Western industrialized societies. What you found was, again, not what the standard theory suggests. So in these societies, do I remember right, was it in the small scale societies or in all societies, actually, both men and women were most concerned with sexual jealousy?
I don't remember what the breakdown was. The thing that I remember most from that paper was that that what seemed to be one of the really important factors in determining how jealous people got was how much investment fathers gave in
Yeah, this was super interesting. So it wasn't that the woman were worried that he will fall in love with someone else as much as he will have sex with someone else. But the reasoning was, well, if he falls in love with someone else, it's still going to be look after our kids. I mean, that's not a big deal. Whereas if he starts to have sex with someone else, they might have kids, and that might actually end up being a catastrophe for our family. So it was quite a kind of a reasonable, thoughtful, rational, who one might even say calculating response.
Yeah, so that study was led by Brooke, Scelza, and Sean Prall, and it originated because of the work that Brooke had done with the Himba. So Himba were definitely included in that study. Yeah, but they the whole idea came about because she had kind of stumbled upon this multiple, this idea of boyfriends, and then this big question about, like, everyone was basically asking her, like, well, don't men get jealous? And then she thought, well, hey, this would be a great context to test this out in, and then sort of elicited the rest of us. I mean, everyone experiences jealousy about various things, right? But yes, and so the men experienced jealousy, but they have these sort of like social rules in place so that they can remain as unjealous as possible. Like, if you don't officially know who the boyfriend is, then you can't really feel jealous. Yeah. So there are clear rules in place to sort of try to tamp down on feelings of jealousy and repercussions from that.
Okay, so that was it for today. I hope that you tune in a couple of days to another similar bonus episode. This will be about the science of happiness. Until then, take care.